Of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, what are the real estate markets like from the agent's perspective? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, are you in the market to buy a house? Then you are at the right place. Realtor Caralee Gurney is here to give us a look at what to expect from the markets today. Caralee, welcome to Prudent Money.
Thank you. It's always great to be here.
Wondered if you swam over here.
I did.
All of a sudden, usually it's supposed to do this like at 5, not in the middle of the afternoon. So we're glad you're here. What an interesting. We've been doing interviews for 4 or 5 years, and just the turn of events through each year has just been really interesting when you look back on it. And so I gotta ask, what's it like today?
Well, it's still pretty busy. We have seen a lot of changes over the past 4 years, and believe it or not, even looking at just my business alone, I've done 60% more this first half of the year than I did last year, first half of the year. So it's still busy, but we are still seeing supply and demand issues. They're not as bad as they were.
Right. Well, we're almost halfway through. And, back in January, what did you think would happen thus far? And were you right or were you wrong? I mean, I know that you had to start off this year looking at what's ahead of you and think, boy, this really could turn out one way or another, or a lot of different ways. I mean, what were you thinking it was going to happen, and were you surprised?
Well, yes. Actually, I thought exactly like you did. What is going to happen? Because you kind of expected the market to do something different, just to kind of, especially with these rising interest rates, you kind of thought maybe the housing market would level off a little bit, and it has a little bit, but it's still a seller's market. If you're looking at all of the MLS for all the area put together, we've got only 3 months of inventory, and it takes 6 months of inventory for it to be an equal market. And then if you look at Collin County, it's only got a little over 1% of inventory.
Right.
So
as you're seeing, looking forward, what's some encouraging besides the supply and demand? I mean, because there's just the desire to get out and buy a home. I mean, is that still the same that you've been seeing the last couple of years? Is how have interest rates kind of affected that?
That's a really good question, and a lot of people ask it right now. And people are still buying. I run across a few people who, are a little scared and decide to wait, but it's not very many. Most people really want a home. They really want an extra space that they can work out of, or extra space for that growing family, or maybe they're ready to downsize, and that doesn't change their life and their decisions. But what we usually recommend is that you date the rate and marry the house. So you can always refinance your house.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I guess I'm surprised a little bit that the way interest rates have really not done much in the bond markets at all, but yet you're still seeing plus 7% interest rates, and but it just doesn't seem like that is necessarily stopping people. But there's got to be a rate that kind of a line in the sand that people, if it got to and went over, that might really affect the market. Do y'all see it that way, or do you?
I hope that rate doesn't ever show up.
Right, I'm sure. Yeah, it was 6.5. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's amazing how people were really disturbed when it hit 5.
Right.
And at one point in time, it was 18%.
Right.
In our history, so I look at 5 or 6 and go, well, that's pretty good.
I was just thinking about what is the average rate, mortgage rates that you've seen throughout history? I mean, what's normal? 7 to 8, 5 to 6?
I would say between 6 and 8. is pretty normal. I think you start hitting 8 and above, it's starting to feel a little. You're starting to itch a little bit.
Let's talk a little bit about bidding wars, because that's always been something that has kind of surprised me as far as the number of bids that would come in for a property. Are you still seeing that as compared to last year's? Is it more, the same, less? Kind of what's happening?
It's been interesting. It's definitely changed over the past 2 years, and I would say last summer it hit full-on brakes, and we stopped seeing it, and then it kind of started creeping back up this fall, and now, depending on different pockets, you're still seeing that. Some pockets in Fort Worth, some pockets in Dallas, some in Plano. It depends on the neighborhood. If it's a really sought-out neighborhood, you're still seeing grossly amounts over asking price.
And how do you manage that scenario? Let's say that you've got a house that you've priced at $300,000, $400,000, and then how do you guide your clients through that?
Well, if you're on the seller side and I'm the listing agent, you have a lot of opportunity there. You know, some people want to have a long lease back. The seller has an advantage to be able to ask for some things that you normally wouldn't typically see happen.
Mm-hmm, right.
So really managing the rest of that is putting it all on a spreadsheet and saying, here's what you have and who's going to be the best option for you. And some of that depends on whether or not their lender's local. It depends on how much cash they're putting into it. Those are some of the things that they're looking at.
And I guess if you're representing the seller, you're just kind of taking your time, because
Yes.
you do have that luxury to look over things, really study them, determine exactly what is in the best interest of the seller. Right?
Absolutely, and I make phone calls too. I mean, it's going to be calling agents to find out, okay, how qualified is your client? How much interest do they really have in this house? And then also just negotiating between the agents and trying to find the best possible buyer at the end of the day that's really going to bring in the most money for that seller.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Being qualified, obviously you want to do that up front, get all that out of the way. What if you're looking at a list of people that are bidding on a property, and you see, what are you looking for from a qualification standpoint? As a minimum, because you could have somebody with a great price, but they're not fully qualified. I mean, how do you balance that?
Well, one of the biggest things is a new form that was developed just a couple of years ago. That's an addendum for multiple offer situations,
Mm-hmm,
and
right.
basically it states exactly what that buyer is really willing to do. So, for example, the house, just for easy money, is $300,000. And the buyer is offering $400,000.
Mm-hmm,
Okay,
right.
How much of that $100,000 are they really willing to pay if it only appraises for $300,000? And this form says, I'm willing to pay this much over appraisal value. I'm willing to not pay anything over appraisal value, or I don't care. I'll pay whatever amount. And those are your three options on the form. So that's been really helpful to us in determining, okay, who's really meaningful here. And then I usually call the lender and walk through, how qualified are they? Do you feel good about them going forward with this? How are their finances? And clearly they can't tell you private information, but they can tell you whether or not they're a strong candidate.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of an interesting scenario when you've got the house being worth a certain price, you've got the bank willing to lend based on that price, and then you got a bidding war going that's taking the house $50,000 to $100,000 above price. So I guess it's kind of one of those things where you really have to see somebody have the cash to come to the table.
Yes, and surprisingly, because cash is definitely king, but there's still more loans than there are cash. So a lot of times you have multiple offers with no cash offers. So you really just have to figure out what type of loan it is and who's going to be the strongest candidate at the end of the day.
Yeah, when you're thinking about getting what the true value of a house is, how is it different today for your
pricing? Yes.
For the estimate of the house and all that type of thing.
It is different. It's a little tricky right now because we're in a hard spot between once having all these multiple offers, and so all the neighborhood houses are already up in value, right? But now we don't have those over offer listing prices like we used to. So because of that, you kind of have to go, okay, where's this house really going to come in where someone really finds value in it? And, at the end of the day, the value of the home is what someone else is willing to pay for it.
Right.
And so it's easy right now to misprice a house, overprice it, because people just aren't willing to do it as much now as they might have been,
Right.
2 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of look, when I think about what y'all go through on a day-to-day basis, I kind of think of you got the seller and the buyer just sitting there looking at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the buyer says, well, when rates were at 5 or 4.5, I could have done this. And that's what I think your house is worth. But the seller's looking at, no, the house is not worth that. And they just kind of see who blinks first. How much of that are you seeing?
A little bit. You see it more when they're not multiple offers. Okay, that house has actually been sitting there a whole week.
Sure.
Surely it's not worth what you've got on
right.
it.
Yeah, I guess it's a situation where you're not seeing the craziness of 2 years ago, but and even compare this to last year, because it would seem maybe that last year was a little bit off.
Well, last year at this particular time,
Mm-hmm.
it was still really crazy. But you moved into June and almost July, and that's when the brakes started.
So is this the time of the year that what's the best 3 to 4 months that people are looking at for buying and selling?
I'll tell you what in general people consider to be the best months, and it's going to be really end of March through July. But for the past 10 years, it's been year-round, pretty much. But I'd say those are the historic times of year that you typically want to buy, and where you see a little bit more inventory than you do other times of year.
So if you weren't seeing the supply and demand situation that you were seeing, would you say that things would probably be pretty locked up, not moving, if you didn't see the supply and demand that you're seeing? Without the supply and demand situation.
Yeah, I think it would be a different market. I mean,
right? Yeah,
I think I'm understanding your question.
Yes.
That if I'm not worried about inventory, what's the market like? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think there's no. I don't know that you would call this you tell me. I don't know that you'd call this a normal real estate market.
No.
Okay, so not a normal real estate, but if this were a normal real estate market and the rates were at what they are right now, you probably wouldn't be seeing hardly any activity like you would today.
Correct.
Is that a
That's
fair
correct.
assumption?
Yes. Yes.
So it leads me to believe that, and it'll be interesting to see, hopefully we won't see this happen, but just what interest rate level is, once I said this earlier, but I think it comes down to, you would think people are not comfortable with 7%, 7.5%, but it seems like they are. I mean, not comfortable, they don't like it, but they're okay with going forward.
They're figuring it out.
They're figuring it out,
and sometimes it's that they can't afford the house they thought they could afford, and I think the biggest challenge right now is affordability, because the prices have gone up so much that your house that used to be $200,000 is now $400,000, and the person that could afford $200,000, their income didn't necessarily go up just because the housing market went up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this pans out for the rest of the year. If you want more information on Caralee, the Mariposa Group, DFW.com. I got it right.
Did.
And that's the Mariposa Group, DFW.com. Let's talk about it from the seller standpoint of, this. We're going to sell our house. There's things that need to be fixed. There are things that need to be painting. And you've seen this probably 100,000 times, where people have gone in and they've dropped all this cash and without really consulting you first. What would you tell a seller? Yeah, that's definitely, you want to do that. Don't worry about that, because they're probably going to change that no matter what you put down. What kind of advice do you give?
So typically you want the house to look nice and be show ready. And in order to do that, definitely a coat of paint always helps. If you're trying to find some extra bucks in the house and you want to update, I recommend doing the master bathroom and the kitchen, because those are the two places you normally get your money back out of. Where people go wrong with those remodels is they do it exactly like they'd like to live in it the rest of their lives, and they go ahead and spend whatever amount they want to. I would really keep a budget on that if you're really going to just sell the house. Just put in some updated counters and paint the cabinets, or stain them if they need to be restained. Some simple things like that. You want your house to be clean and neutral. So if you need to replace carpets, some people say, oh, let's just give them money to do that, kind of like you were mentioning.
Right.
But that's not really always the best way to do it. If you can put something neutral in there, that even if they're going to change it, it's going to make your house look better when you walk in, and you'll get more money for it than if you have really nasty part carpets and someone walks in and they're like, this is gross, I can't see past that.
Yeah, maybe a couple of years ago you could have looked past it, right?
Right.
But not today.
No, it's pretty important to have your house. I kind of call myself the listing Nazi. You want to make sure,
Right.
All your things are put away, your house looks show ready, your lights are on, and your house is clean. And that's a really big part. And if your walls have holes in them or marks all over the walls, it doesn't look clean. So you want to just give it that fresh look more than anything.
What is probably the biggest deal killer when it comes right down to it? Is it foundation? Is it, I don't know. What have you come across that and I kind of put you on the spot on this.
No. I know the answer because I'm with people all the time who have concerns. And, foundation is a really big issue with people. It's funny that you bring that up. I have some people, especially new home buyers who don't know anything about it, that are scared to death of it. And the fact of the matter is, this area has foundation issues.
Oh, everybody does.
Almost every
don't
house you go into. The key is has it been checked out? Has the work been done? Does it have a lifetime warranty? Then you can pretty much get past it if it's not just a big cosmetic mess. So that's one thing. The other thing that's hard to get past is animal smells. If you've got animals urinating on the carpets and you can smell it, or cigarette smoke.
Oh,
those things
yeah, that would be a
really
deal
hard.
killer.
And they can be helped. You can do things about them. So I would recommend doing that. That would definitely be a for sure thing to do.
So have you, how many times have you walked into a situation and go, oh my gosh, this has got it needs a lot of help?
Yes, a lot of times. I mean, I've seen a lot of houses in nearly 12 years of doing business, and I've seen everything. I've seen some that I'm like, I can't believe someone lives like this. I've seen some that look like you should have a hazmat suit when you go in.
Oh.
And then I've seen some that, just need a little extra.
So talk a little bit about all these companies that have gone into business, and they call, I get 2 or 3 calls a day. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but a lot of calls during the week of, hey, we want to buy your home. What's going on? I mean, how much do these people really low when it comes right down to it? Because they got to make money. They got to put money into the house. They got to sell it. They got to make a profit. So they couldn't give you too good of a deal.
No, they don't give you a good deal. I mean, especially if it's an investor calling, they've got to find a profit margin in there somewhere. So they're looking for someone who has a lot of work that needs to be done to their house, so that they can, say, okay, well, we'll give you this for it because probably no one else will, and then we'll remodel it and sell it. And usually in that situation with investors, they usually don't charge a fee on their side like other realtors do. So they make a little bit of money back that way. But definitely.
I mean, do you see a lot of homeowners taking those deals?
Not so much. I mean, you do definitely see them.
Obviously,
they
wouldn't be calling if we didn't see
exactly.
it, right?
But you have to be careful with those because a lot of them have some extra fees in there that you don't expect. I know one person called me and she said, you know what, we were going to use this company, and you know what, when we looked at the numbers at the end of the day, it was the same as using you, and we'd rather give you the money. And it's just the fees that you don't expect because it looks one way on one area, so you need to go back and look through the contracts and make sure you're not missing some fees they're charging.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Caralee Gurney is my guest today, and she talked a little bit about real estate. If you want more information, the Mariposa Group, DFW.com, is where you would go. Let's talk a little bit about, this was the big story 3 years ago. All these companies were moving to the DFW area. Is that done? Or is there still possible companies that are still coming? And do we want? Well, you want that. But
well, I don't know. Does the traffic?
I mean, because the
can the traffic handle that?
The infrastructure is really starting to kind of get to a point that it is tough.
I think they were talking about in 2030 or 2035, they thought the traffic would be like LA here.
I've always thought that. How long is it going to really take to get to that point?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think some great things have come here. Because it's such a desirable place, I don't think we're finished, but we'll see. I mean, you've got all the PGA stuff happening right now, and it's pretty exciting, all that's going on up there in Frisco, which will bring a lot more attractions here.
So the work from home dynamic, how has that changed things? I mean, because if you got a company that's coming to the DFW area, you're not so sure how many of those employees are coming.
I know, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of companies say, hey, let's go back to work. Let's get back in the office. But then you still have a lot of opportunity to work from home with different jobs. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, are you seeing people move just because they need office space within their home?
I was when COVID was going on, but I don't see that much now.
You don't see that?
That's
that's
not really
interesting.
the reason now that people are moving.
Really? I would have thought that would have been a real reason why people are putting their homes on, or maybe it's an excuse that pushes them over the edge. You know, we need office space, and we're going to work from home.
It's really not a conversation I have much lately.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought different. Well, let's talk a little bit about the builders. We kind of don't mention them very often, but are they having a tough time because they're in their own little world of inventory and different situations they're coming up against? I mean, how is life going for most builders?
It's interesting because, 2 years ago they were really stringent. It was hard to get a house because they'd have these long wait lists, and the sales reps would actually, I don't know if you knew this or not, they would actually lock the door to the to the model so that they can talk to anybody.
I can see that.
They're like, we don't have a house for you, so I'm gonna hide.
Right.
And so that kind of was the process there for a little bit, which made it hard. It made it hard for someone to build a home. It made it hard for realtors to find someone to talk to see if they had anything available. And so that went on for a little bit. And interestingly enough, it was crazy to see the difference in how home builders responded to agents versus how they did in the past, because they've always been so welcoming and glad that we bring people to them, and it just became completely different. And so,
in what way?
Well, either you bring a client in, and then they'd try to have the client cut the realtor out.
I would imagine
people you had contracts with.
I would imagine that things have, if there's any environment where things could get cutthroat, it would be this environment.
It can be, but it is better now. I think the hardest thing is when you have a new neighborhood and just finding out the details of when that's coming about and getting in on that list. That's still pretty hard, but it's a lot better than it used to be. And supplies are better too. So now they can build a house.
So let me ask you this, right, as we wrap things up: is it tougher, or is it the same as it's kind of always been to do what you're to be a realtor?
It's funny because I've been in almost 12 years, and from the
you've
day I started,
seen a lot of different, extremes.
I have, and interestingly enough, you hear about that 7-year switch. You know how after 7 years it kind of switches to the buyer's market or the seller's market. It hadn't done that in 12 years, or nearly 12 years. So the multiple offers have been there since I started. I actually started my first steps in multiple offers. It's gotten better and it's gotten worse, but it's been pretty crazy.
The Mariposa Group, DFW.com, if you want more information about Caralee. This is Bob Brooks. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith. Have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.